Having power is often thought of as having the upper hand or having control over people. People that accumulate that power are usually attributed it from intelligence, money, or a higher power. Usually money, in some cases, higher power attributing it to them, or democracy in some countries. It is known that power often correlates with corruption and is seen in rulers in high positions. That is due to psychological effects that gives the brain a sense of foolishly high confidence and superiority to people. Corruption does not aid politics in positive ways and is seen in both the extract of 2.1 in Macbeth and the rule of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. In Macbeth, there are several linguistic features that show us how corruption has gotten to Macbeth. Two I want to talk about are symbolism and characterism. Symbolism, the dagger, is a symbol of Macbeth's courage. At this point in time, Macbeth is at the peak of his power. He is Thane of Glamis and Thane of Cawdor. And he is seeing a possibility of being even more powerful by becoming king. And to do that, he needs to kill the king of that point, which is King Duncan. He's also encouraged by his wife, Lady Macbeth, who is seen as even more courageous than Macbeth has been showing. He envisions a bloody dagger that is just a part of his imagination and imagines himself as the deed being done. But the deed was not done. And when Macbeth was able to process that and to process the fact of doing the deed, which he was dreading, he finally pulls out his own real dagger and is ready to continue with the plan of assassinating the king. The second, characterism, is seen. As mentioned before, Macbeth is somewhat of a coward and is reminded by his wife previously when she says, "It is too full of the milk of human kindness" in Act 1, Scene 5. Despite the fact, after having a plan to put in place for him as well as a sword that is given him the power, the courage to do so, the fellow Thane of Cawdor and Thane of Glamis is no longer guilty for doing that deed. This is an example of what power can do to you and how it affects how you view yourself and how much confidence you show. He is ready to sacrifice his position for having more power, which shows us that he is corrupt and power corrupts people. The second example is seen as the Venezuelan ruler Nicolas Maduro, who was voted during a special election after the death of his former Hugo Chavez. Venezuela fell under severe crisis. To begin with, commodities such as electricity and water would be cut for several hours a day with no explanation, which made people very angry with the president. Maduro was set in power by special election, as mentioned before. And special elections are notorious for having low voting rates, meaning Maduro was almost guaranteed the position after the death of former leader Hugo Chavez. Before his rule as president, Maduro was vice president, meaning he already had a lot of power, but not enough as a president would. So that is similar to how Macbeth was Thane of Cawdor and Glamis, but not yet at its peak and wanted even more power. As Nicolas Maduro continued his rule, he began leaning more and more towards authoritarian and an early dictatorship. That is not positively seen, and it led the country of Venezuela to begin revolting and planning more and more ways in which they can stop Maduro from exercising his power. This is showing us that when Maduro was entrusted with political power, he began to destroy and corrupt his own country to the point where people felt helpless. As said by a civilian, a preschool teacher, I feel hopeless and despair. How they connect? To conclude, both Maduro and Macbeth had previously been assigned positions of power, and both had counterparties that were fighting against their power, against their corruption specifically. For Maduro, it was Guaido and his movement and his several rallies, and for Macbeth, it was his conscience telling him not to kill the king. Both, when they attained full power, became strongly corrupt at the expense of others, and their rule began to affect their psychological being, and to the point where they were recognizably different.